I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
There's insanity in the control room.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, Waldorf Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Hey, feeling a little bit better today. So we got a show. It's a good one. Stay tuned. We got Ted Cruz. We got QAnoners, warning of violence. We got some linked emails. We got Marjorie Taylor Greene apologizing, and of course we're going to talk about critical race theory. And how Republicans can't seem to define it. Weird. Fascinating. Yes, again, I'm feeling a little less angry today, although it's more of like a resigned sadness. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm not going to get into it. Let's do it. I'm already late to the show, so let's dive in. We're going to start out with, of course, what's going on in Texas. All right. Senator Ted Cruz had a tweet that aged very, very poorly. Now, the tweet in question, of course, has to do with power. Power, which seems to not be in large supply in Texas right now. In fact, on Monday night, ERCOT, that is the local Texas authority when it comes to energy, issued a warning for Texans to conserve power as the state's self-isolated energy grid began to fail in the recent heat wave. So it's hot in Texas, of course, you're not surprised. But there is a heat wave also going on in Texas. And as a result of the demand from the high temperatures, Texas's main power grid has been struggling to keep up with demand for electricity, prompting the operator to ask Texans to conserve power until the end of the week. So Monday, they're like, hey, this week, we know it's a heat wave. You might want to, not use power. Oh, you mean the time that we need it? We're not supposed to use it. Oh, great. So now the Electric Reliability Council of Texas said in a statement on Monday that a significant number of unexpected power plant outages combined with expected record use of electricity due to hot weather, has resulted in tight grid conditions. Approximately 12,000 megawatts of generation were offline on Monday, or enough to power about 2.4 million homes on a hot summer day. So that is fairly significant. ERCOT officials said power plant outages were unexpected and could not provide details as to what could be causing them. Now, tell me again, the wonders of free market capitalism when it comes to, of course, basic necessities like energy. Supposed to be more efficient. It's supposed to be good, right? No. Apparently, turns out not to be good. Of the plants offline, about 9,600 megawatts of power, or nearly 80% of the outages, are from thermal power sources, which in Texas are largely natural gas-fired power plants. So you're probably going to hear, or you're probably already hearing, that, hey, these power outages, solar panels, alternative energy, what are you going to do? We should invest more heavily in fossil fuels. That would be a complete prevarication. It's a lie. Sad. It's, actually the fault of, well, there's a lot of fault here, but none of it's on alternative energy. That's for sure. Now, that 9,600 megawatts of power is actually several times what ERCOT usually sees offline for thermal generation maintenance during the summer day. Typically, only about 3,600 megawatts of thermal generation are offline this time of year. The grid operator also estimates demand for electricity could exceed 73,000 megawatts on Monday. The previous record for June was 69,100 megawatts in 2018. That's a nice number. Not so nice now. What could be one of the reasons temperatures are going so high? Of course, it's Texas. Texas is dry. Texas is hot. It's summer. In fact, as Joshua Rhodes, research associate at the Weber Energy Group at the University of Texas at Austin, says, electricity demand is really driven by temperatures. Right now, it is 99 degrees in Dallas, 97 degrees in Austin, and 97 degrees in Houston. He said at those high temperatures, people tend to turn on their air conditioners, which, of course, makes all the sense in the world. Now, of course, when so many people engage their air conditioning units, that tends to strain the grid, especially if they're not expecting anything. At the same time, he said power plants were already having a rough year, given the damage that happened back in February during that ice storm, which causes or may be causing new complications. So I may know the problem here. Okay. Obviously, geospace lasers. No, I'm kidding. Of course. No, what you have here is freak snowstorms. Okay. Unusually high temperatures in summertime. Could it be climate change? Partly, obviously. Yes, climate change has a lot to do with the warming of temperatures of the Earth. And so what you have is more extremes, more extreme weather events, including freak snowstorms where you shouldn't have freak snowstorms, as well as generally hotter temperatures, more extreme droughts, more extreme temperatures, and all that stuff. So now, add to that, because again, okay, climate change, well, we all know, or at least we all should know, that it is here, that it's happening. You could prepare for it. Well, that was the other part of the thing, is that they didn't prepare for it. The Texas grid is highly deregulated. In fact, it is completely separate from the rest of the United States grid, which means they, because they weren't regulated, didn't prepare for the storms, didn't prepare for the heat wave, didn't prepare for these unusually high temperatures. And so what you end up having is a gigantic double whammy. They did not plan for the effects of climate change in the grid, and now, as a result of climate change, the grid is failing. It seems like you could have actually done something about this by being smart and not stupid. Texas, understand that Texas is a pretty big state. Texas has a lot of real estate and a lot of sunlight. It seems like a great place to put massive solar generators. I think that if you're not investing in solar, think about it this way. That is limitless free energy down the drain. It is comically stupid as a society, as a state, to not invest into solar. And for one, by the way, jobs, good jobs. Not only that, it reduces emissions and slows down climate change, which right now is destroying your grid. And three, as long as you have robust energy storage solutions, as well as a proper energy mix for emergencies, you can weather, get the pun here, you can weather emergencies such as this. But no, that costs money. Also, in Texas, we only do things for profit here. And also, big bad government, freedom, tree of liberty, bald eagles, and stuff. You know, that kind of thing. Now, Ted Cruz is the senator of Texas, I mentioned. And he is, again, one of the tweets, going back to that aged pretty poorly here, goes back to when California was having some power problems. Here's what Ted Cruz tweeted about this. He said, California, this is back of August 2020, California is now unable to perform even basic functions of civilization, like having reliable electricity. Biden-Harris AOC want to make California's failed energy policy the standard nationwide. Hope you don't like air conditioning. For one, hey, Ted, fuck you. All right? Secondly, the official analysis of California's blackouts, which they had in August of 2020, highlighted 3 different main reasons for the outages. Again, hot weather exacerbated by climate change, antiquated grid reliability, planning, and malfunctioning energy markets. So now, if you're looking to blame renewables like Ted Cruz and other Texas officials have on what happened in Texas and also what happened in California, well, you're sadly going to be mistaken. It is not the fault of renewable energies. As I said earlier, 80% of the downed plants in Texas were thermal, natural gas plants. Another thing to point out is that the blackouts in Texas were actually worse. In California, in the August 2020 outages were actually smaller and far shorter. In fact, on August 14th, the California grid operator had asked utilities to shed about a total of 500 megawatts of load for approximately 2 hours. So, hey, you know, that extra TV you've got on, or, you know, maybe you set your air conditioner to like 75. Do that for a couple of hours, and we can avoid rolling blackouts. On August 15th of 2020, it was actually about 500 megawatts of load for a total of 20 minutes. In Texas, they are telling people right now not to use lights, pool pumps, as well as to avoid using large appliances such as ovens, washing machines, dryers, and turning off or unplugging unused electrical appliances. And that is not for 2 hours or 20 minutes. It is for at least an entire week. The difference here is they're kind of stark. It's bad in Texas. And unfortunately for Texans, it is self-inflicted. Mainly because they refused to take the extra time and spend the extra money to weatherproof. And again, since they have an isolated grid, they're not able to do what California was actually able to do during their blackouts or brownouts or their power issues, which is, of course, borrow power from other states because of the connected power grid. Texas doesn't have that. They said, no, we're going to stand on our own, and we're going to deregulate the hell out of all of this, out of our power system. And, of course, lo and behold, this is what happens when you do that. It's all due to the choices that Texas has made. And by the way, energy policy for the country in favoring fossil fuels and exacerbating climate change. So. How can we help Texas? I have no idea. I actually have no idea how to help Texas. Honestly, they really did make their own bet on this one. And I'm not talking about the people. I'm not talking about the voters. I'm talking about the Texas politicians. And yes, the voters do share some responsibility for putting those people in office, obviously. But you know, I just feel like blaming the voters is a little too reductive at this point. Yes, again, they share some blame on this one. But again, you have politicians that are generally making the decisions here that are pretty relatively terrible. And Ted Cruz is one of those politicians. All right. Abbott recently did some stuff related to ERCOT, but I'm not informed enough to feel comfortable explaining it. Yes, he did try to make some changes after February, but it didn't seem to do a whole lot to do, anything. So, all right, anyway. Well, moving on. Let's go to QAnon. Set up a chain of power strips and extension cords. Good one. Nice. But that would involve getting power from the rest of the United States, and they don't do that. So. All right. A former QAnon conspiracy theorist has some dire warnings for Americans. Take a look.
How far are you worried that they could take it?
Well, if you think about it, their battle in their mind, this nature of this crisis is existential for them. It's not a battle between authoritarian and libertarian, between left and right, between nation states. It's a battle between God and the devil. Literally, it's a battle for their souls, for their children's souls. I mean, if you believe that, if you really believe that, what would you do? What wouldn't you do?
So now, look, that guy was a believer. He was part of the QAnon movement, and basically just made the point that these people could be pretty dangerous because of what they believe and how fervently they believe it. And again, they're not thinking like this isn't normal politics. This isn't normal political divisions. Like, oh, I disagree with that person on taxes or on, government mandates on corporations. No, they believe that one side is killing children and drinking their brain juice for Satan. This is not normal discourse. This is not a left-right divide. It is unhinged conspiracies wrapped in ignorance and religion. And so what you have is a movement of people who might feel spurred on to violence in order to stop what they see as the devil. You gotta stop the devil. And so now Berman is going to ask in this next clip, John Berman, how people could believe in this stuff.
It's terrifying. And I'm always faced with the question, how could you believe it, though? How could you believe that?
Well, it's a strange thing because sometimes I ask myself the same thing. But as with any kind of fall down any kind of hole, it starts with some small thing and then it ends with another, then it ends with another. And then you're all the way down the rabbit hole and you have no idea what to believe and what not to believe. So you want to believe that you're on the right side, that you're fighting for good against injustice. And it's almost like the more disenfranchised you are, the stronger that belief is because of the lack of meaning and purpose in your own life.
Again, more great points. Generally, when you have nothing to lose, it tends to make you more radicalized and more prone to actually carrying out violence. Again, you can look at a lot of different cults throughout the ages. And it really does show you how violence can perpetuate from some of these beliefs. And now, what he talked about as well is another great example of a pipeline. You see maybe like one or two things, a few things that have some truth to it. And then you add on to it. For example, Jeffrey Epstein. Well, Jeffrey Epstein, pedophile. He liked girls, little girls. Epstein, like many rich people, happen to, have a lot of power, a lot of money, happen to give a lot of money to politicians, maybe to turn their eyes away from what he was doing. Oh, it looks like also many politicians happen to be corrupt and take money from billionaires. Well, Epstein happened to be wealthy, and that's why maybe he wasn't caught until later on. Maybe he's got dirt on people who are powerful. Maybe dirt on Trump. Maybe dirt on Bill Clinton. Maybe he was murdered as a result. Maybe the Clintons murdered him. Maybe he killed a lot of people. The Clintons are Democrats. And yeah, now this YouTuber is pointing out how all the Democrats are in favor of this and how they're bad and how maybe they're also pedophiles and maybe then they're godly Satanists because the left doesn't believe in religion and maybe Hillary Clinton's killing the children and maybe drinking the brain juice. That's how it goes. It's not that dramatic. But understand, it happens little by little. That you are continuously dragged down these little rabbit holes through little pieces of truth. Right? Things that, oh, okay. Or maybe they feel truth. They feel truth. There's just truthiness to it, as Colbert would always put it. Like, oh, you feel it in your gut. You know? And there's just this little bit of, like, I don't know, this seems to make sense. And then eventually, at some point, you end up thinking that, Democrats are punching holes through people's skulls and putting a straw in there and just drinking the brain out. It's weird, but it happens. And so and a lot of this can start with totally legitimate questions about people in power. And then at some point, you might end up in a cult. And so, and here's the thing. Here's the thing. You have to remain open-minded, obviously. I always make sure to let you all know that, like, be open-minded about things. That, again, there are conspiracies that have a big kernel of truth in them. I'm somebody who loves to look into conspiracy theories, how they start, how they spread, what they believe, and what leads them to those conclusions. However, right, you have to be, yes, open-minded with things, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out, okay? Because at some point, these conspiracy theories, and this is, remember Occam's razor, okay? Occam's razor basically says that usually the simplest answer is the correct one. So when you look at situations like, Epstein, for example, yeah, he was a pedophile. Yes, he liked little girls. Yes, he was very powerful, had a lot of money. Well, in our society, people with money and power tend to get away with a lot more things because they have money, power, and influence. That's unfortunately a fact of, I think, a lot of our societies, what you have. And it's a simple answer is that money, power, and influence happen to have people turn their heads away. That doesn't mean that everybody who was involved with Epstein, well, I guess I'm not going to go that far. There are certainly people who were involved with Epstein that were very complicit in this. But at the same time, there are a lot of people that maybe heard some rumors and thought, well, I don't know for sure. I don't know him personally. I'm just not getting involved because I'm afraid of any sort of pushback or anything like that. And so I don't know. There are rumors about Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein, for so many years that people just turned their back on and ignored. And you had Hollywood, you had casting couches. And so you have all of these things that people absolutely know that were wrong, that were going on, that I don't want to get involved because there is money and power here, and maybe I'd get buried by this. And so I'm just not going to bring it up. I'm not talking about it. I'm scared to bring it up. That's part of what originally Me Too was all about, is women having these situations, and then you end up having powerful people that silence them into submission. And so there's that, okay? But getting back to conspiracy theories, right? Again, a lot of conspiracy theories do start with a grain of truth, but then as they get more and more complicated, tend to fall apart under questioning, when you actually look into what makes up the conspiracy theory. At some point, when it gets too complicated, it gets too difficult to keep together, and it really kind of falls apart. Okay, and that's QAnon. That's QAnon. The belief that Donald Trump is the only one that's fighting against satanic pedophiles in the Democratic Party kind of falls apart when you look at Trump's own history. When you look at sexual harassment, the abuse, allegations of rape, and outright ridiculous lies. a lot of QAnoners, unfortunately, they don't know any of this stuff. And they see some of the facts and reject them as, well, it's fake news, obviously. Because, unfortunately, a lot of them take things on faith. That is why you have conspiracies and religion that are so easily intertwined. And I'm not saying, by the way, religion itself is a predictor in believing in conspiracies. But the act of taking things on faith alone is kind of something that is obviously human, and both of these groups tend to share. And again, it is human to take things on faith in certain people and certain things. And you know, I'm not sure exactly what you can do about that. But the good news is that people can get back to reality. People can realize that they're wrong. Not everybody is a lost cause, and that at least gives me some hope. Not a lot of people, but some. And so the worry, though, here, and the ultimate warning is, these people who still believe, a chunk of them are so fervent in their beliefs that they could become violent as a result. And it is definitely something, especially after January 6th, that needs to be taken seriously by pretty much everybody. I mean, you can't really ignore the QAnon stuff. Law enforcement, media, people at home do need to take this seriously. And by the way, there's another lesson here, of course. When presented with information, always think critically. If it seems fantastical, it usually is. So always make sure to vet your information thoroughly to avoid falling down these pipelines. Yeah, they want to believe in pedo cabals because it gives them purpose. Something to crusade against, keyword crusade. Yeah, it is that wanting to feel super important. I totally understand that. All right. Let's move on. Whoops. No, that works. That works. Recently leaked emails obtained by CNN showed that former top Trump officials at the Department of Justice were not exactly happy to be asked to investigate the voter fraud conspiracy theory known as a big lie by former President Donald Trump and his allies. In fact, emails show that former acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and a former acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue both wanted no part of a White House pressure campaign to use the department to investigate voter fraud conspiracies, including a new conspiracy. I had never heard of this one before, about apparently the country of Italy getting involved. Yes, Italy, by using satellites to somehow change voting machines. So now, during elections, the voting machines are not hooked up to the internet. So it seems rather interesting, the whole conspiracy of, no, it was a satellite that changed the votes. Italy. So let me give you some details on this, because this is fascinating. As I told you, I love conspiracies. Now, apparently there's a group calling itself Nations in Action that published a press release on January 6th with the headline, "Senior IT expert at global defense contractor testifies in Italian federal court he and others switched votes through America using satellites." According to its website, Nations in Action is based in Sarasota, Florida. It was established in 2017 to, quote, address the collapse of the civil society with families struggling to maintain faith, values, and virtues. Just to kind of show you what this group's about. According to its website, now that group I gave you the website. That's what they're about. And for me, they sound super sus. So now they also kind of, in response to CNN asking, hey, where's your proof? They refuse to give up their evidence of Italy-gate. Now, the press release, which claims to have come from Rome, Italy on January 5th, alleges that an employee of the Italian defense, security, and aerospace company, Leonardo SPA, provided a shocking deposition detailing his role in the most elaborate criminal act affecting a U.S. election. So this person comes out and testifies, again, without actually possessing any evidence, makes these claims. It names Arturo D'Elia as employee and states that he had outlined a scheme that proved successfully in using Leonardo computer systems and military satellites located in Pescara, Italy, to interfere in the U.S. election in favor of Joe Biden. The press release quotes the group's chair, Maria Strollo-Zak, saying, "Make no mistake, this is a coup d'etat that we will stop in the name of justice and free and fair elections." She also alleges that recent arrested employees at Leonardo were related to the incident, and that the plan was orchestrated by former President Barack Obama with help of the former Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, as well as the CIA. Unhinged. Wow. Wait. First it's China, and now Italy? And I think there's something about Germany, and then there was Iran. And so, I mean, who's at some point, who's not involved here? Okay. And this is why conspiracies fascinate me, because when one thing doesn't pan out, they move to the next. It is constant goalpost moving. And so that's what we have going on here. So now, obviously, debunked. On November 12th, a national coalition of election security officials announced that there is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost any votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. Again, they're not hooked up to the internet. Now, not only that, but all of the states with the close results in the 2020 presidential race actually had a paper trail, paper records of each vote. So if you're unsure, if you think the votes were changed, well, then just go back to the paper record, the paper ballots, and count those, which they did. Now, they added that this is a added benefit for security and resilience. The process allows for identification and correction of any mistakes or errors. And that's what they did. That's what all the recounts were about. And so they did a hand recount and found no votes were changed. Biden still won. That should be it. Apparently, no. Now, USA Today, Reuters, PolitiFact, and the Associated Press, by the way, have debunked these claims and also added that spikes in the vote. And this is one thing that conspiracy theorists are like, oh, look at all the spikes in the votes going to the Democrats. Well, that's because they counted the mail-in ballots late. And we all knew that was going to happen because counting the mail-in ballots is slower than counting ballots in election day. So they got to wait for those ballots to come in and then add them. And of course, the spike, most of these votes that were mail-in came from Democrats. Why? It's because coronavirus, where a lot of Democrats were really wary about going out on election day because of the fears of coronavirus, whereas Republicans apparently didn't give a shit. And they all showed up on election day. In fact, Donald Trump had said, don't use mail-in ballots, full of fraud. Come to the polls in person on election day. And so, is this really any shock that there were spikes in Democratic votes coming in because of mail-in ballots? No, not at all. Not at all. And so left-leaning counties also released results in large batches, which, of course, to some people looked very suspicious, and yet that was absolutely expected. Now, again, as I also mentioned, the recounts that had happened were paper ballots. Now, another thing that they mentioned, there are employees that were arrested Well, it turns out that was true, but they were arrested for an alleged role in doing their own hacking, trying to hack the company computers in order to steal sensitive information between the years of 2015 and 2017, not at all related to this election. And by the way, also, they claimed that there were servers hidden in Germany, that somehow have the information. You know how Donald Trump was trying to go after the information stored on servers in Ukraine? This is kind of the same thing. Oh, they get the proof. It's in the servers hidden in Ukraine. The servers, they've got all the information. You got to get the servers. And now the same thing in Italy-gate was saying, no, there were servers not in Ukraine, but in Germany. They were hidden. So obviously we got to go find it, and then and apparently the German government raided them and found the servers, and so therefore Italy-gate is true, but no, it didn't actually happen. There was no raid of election servers in Germany, and so that is completely debunked as well. No servers in Germany. That said, your Trump officials, Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, sending Rosen a YouTube video that outlined this entire conspiracy, the Italy-gate. Rosen forwarded it to Donahue, who simply called it, quote unquote, pure insanity. Well, yeah. Rosen also denied a Meadows request for the Justice Department to review purported signature match anomalies in Georgia. Can you believe this? Rosen wrote to Donahue about Meadows' request. I am not going to respond to the message below. I'm just not going to do it. Because it's nonsense. Total nonsense. Understand that these are people who work with crazy people. What do you do? What do you do when you work with crazy people that are completely unhinged and untethered to reality? Well, apparently you say, I'm not doing that. Fire me if you want. I don't really care. This is unhinged. This is crazy. It's true. The emails also show that Rosen pointed to refuse to meet with Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani. In fact, he said, quote, I flatly refused and said I would not be giving any special treatment to Giuliani or any of his so-called witnesses, and reaffirmed yet again that I will not talk to Giuliani about any of this. Rosen wrote in one email after being asked to meet with Giuliani. Meadows in total fired about a total of about 5 different emails, at least, all filled with different election-related conspiracies, including alleged voter fraud in New Mexico. The Times' Katie Benner also said the communication between Mr. Meadows and Mr. Rosen, she was writing in the New York Times, which have not been previously reported, show the increasingly urgent efforts by Mr. Trump and his allies during the last days in office to find some way to undermine or even nullify the election results while he still had control of the government. And so that's what you have. You had Trump believing these insane conspiracies, Fox News spreading them, QAnon, all that. And then he's literally trying to get people in the government to go, hey, investigate this, get that, look at this, Italy-gate. Whatever other gate that you can think of. Just go investigate it. I heard from my friends at Fox News. I heard from Newsmax. Go look it up. Complete and utter nonsense. And look, the reason, of course, is the guy couldn't handle losing. Trump, again, literally believed himself to be the smartest, bestest president ever. And that he couldn't possibly lose to anyone, especially somebody like sleepy Joe Biden. Oh, my God. And the people that followed him, by the way, who gained power in his office, wanted to hold on to that. And so a lot of them listened to him. But thankfully, there were people who didn't. Because, again, it would have ended up with nothing, obviously. It just would have wasted time and resources and all of that stuff, looking into ridiculous stuff like Italy-gate. Italian, you've got Italian satellites that are out there, They're beaming the information to the things, to the voting machines, changing the vote for Biden. Insane. At least there were people who didn't want to be a part of that, and part of the attempt to steal an election. Well, thank goodness for that. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. More stories here. Marjorie Taylor Greene apologizes. Holy crap. And then, of course, critical race theory. We have a Republican that seems to have a hard time defining it. So I'm going to help him out. Stay right here around the nation.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
There's insanity in the control room.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Waldorf Nation. Waldorf here with you. All right, so before we get to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I want to thank some super chats. Read some of them. Thank you for, let's see. I don't know if that was yesterday. The show must go on. Thank you, Marty Darno. I don't know if that was today or yesterday. Goku Just Saying says, actually, they were told about weatherproofing, but because it wasn't mandatory, the budget went the cheap route. True. Very true. Let's see. Also, let's not forget.
Big, massive dumps.
There we go. Gabby Mathis, thank you. I like the shirt. Fun times. Dumps so big they clogged the toilet. Tremendous big massive dumps. I was yesterday. Well, thank you anyway. I do appreciate that. Yeah, sometimes I miss donos. Over here on Twitter. Let's see. You can tell that none of these people know anything about the human body, says Nikki, the hippie loopy. There's no such thing as brain juice, at least not anatomically, and you can't suck it out like a slushie. But the adrenochrome, Nikki, the adrenochrome. That's what they're going after. He had to flush 15 times. Oh God. Yes. Just going back to the speeches that he would give about, oh, you got to flush 15 times because it won't go down. You got to flush so many times. These water toilets. Oh my God. It's so bad. It's so bad. All right, anyway. Let's go to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Speaking of, again, conspiracies. You know what? Before I get into that, Netanyahu. When have you brought that up? I suppose.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Bibi Netanyahu. So normally there'd be pretty good news, but it's actually more nuanced than that. And that's like, I didn't have a prepared segment for it, but let me just go over what I know. Yes, Netanyahu has been forced out by a coalition government. Unfortunately, the guy that's replacing him is actually kind of worse, if you can believe it. Even further right wing, very nationalist, and very anti-Palestinian. But, and here's where the nuance goes, right? So, in order to oust Netanyahu, there had to be a coalition government. Now, one of the parties, since it's a parliamentary system, one of the parties is actually Palestinian, Arab, I should say. And so the guy's got to walk a really, really fine line, meaning that he might not be able to and be able to keep his power by going excessively hard on Palestinians like he would normally do. And so, yes, hatred for Benjamin Netanyahu is a great unifier. And so, look, as I said, it's a very nuanced situation. It's very delicate, very tenuous alliance or coalition between these different disparate parties who want absolutely different things. But they all despised Benjamin Netanyahu. So that is really interesting stuff. I really should be watching more in depth what happens here. But at the same time, you know, Benjamin Netanyahu gone. I don't know if it's going to make any big difference in how Palestinians are treated in Israel right now. I hope, but again, I don't hold out a lot of hope. So there's that. I don't think it's going to get better, but I don't. But with the way that their parliament is made up right now, maybe it won't get worse. I guess it's the only thing we'd hope for right now with the way that it's set up. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene recently apologized for making a pretty horrible comparison between mask mandates and the Holocaust. Take a look.
I'm very much a normal person, and I think it's important for me to always be transparent and honest. One of the best lessons that my father always taught me was when you make a mistake, you should own it. And I have made a mistake, and it's really bothered me for a couple of weeks now. And so I definitely want to own it. This afternoon, I visited the Holocaust Museum. The Holocaust there's nothing comparable to it. It happened, and, you know, over 6 million Jewish people were murdered. More than that, there were not just Jewish people, black people, Christians, all kinds of people, children, people that the Nazis didn't believe were good enough or perfect enough. And the horrors of the Holocaust are something that some people don't even believe happened, and some people deny, but there is no comparison to the Holocaust. And there are words that I have said, remarks that I've made that I know are offensive, and for that I want to apologize.
Oh, so let me just start off by saying I'm a normal person. Normal people don't have to say that. I just want to point that out. That is not something that normal people say. Like, have to point out, I'm such a normal person. It's sort of like I'm not racist, but oh, okay. But hey, at least she followed it up with, I made a mistake. I said the wrong thing. Apologize for that. It was bad. Turns out, Holocaust, bad. Okay, but okay. So now this is after weeks, by the way, of people saying, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's a terrible comparison. What are you doing? That's horrible and anti-Semitic. It's really, really messed up. And at first she was like, no, I was right. Double down, triple down on the comparison. Even after Republicans, by the way, criticized her for it. But now apparently it took her traveling to the Holocaust Museum for her to actually realize, oh, oops, turned out kind of bad. You know? Yeah, right. Oops. Everybody makes mistakes, you know, and just calls one of the worst humanitarian or the worst humanitarian disaster in human history, Holocaust, where 6 million people were murdered, at least, you know, bad. Turns out it's bad. I mean, on the one hand, at least you accept objective reality. Maybe you learned something. But holy shit, I really don't want to give you credit, because the ignorance of the situation should not be an excuse. I mean, she is a terrible person on so many fronts. Spreading anti-vax conspiracies. By the way, the death toll is now over 600,000 people on COVID-19. Saying that it was a bioweapon, while not actually believing in evolution, which doesn't make any sense because you would need to understand evolution in order to create a bioweapon. But again, nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense. All right. And so I'm actually pretty dubious of her sudden eureka moment in finally realizing that the systemic murder of millions of Jewish people, Roma, left-wingers to disabled, anybody who didn't meet that ideal in their minds was wrong. Oh, wow, yeah, wow, you finally figured it out. No, the whole thing seems pretty disingenuous. And that's because I think she's proven herself to be nothing more than a ridiculous troll. Remember, same person who stalked survivors of school shooting. Same person who weirdly stalked AOC and yelled at her through a mail slot. Made massively anti-Semitic remarks about Jewish space lasers starting wildfires, spread QAnon conspiracies. And no, for her, no cookies for you, okay? Stealing the line from Anna Kasparian. It doesn't seem genuine at all. It seems like it had to have been some sort of pressure put on her. And at some point, she had to relent. And there it is. There it is. All right. Moving on. Critical race theory. Do it. What's your political identity? Liberal or more left-leaning? Look, I'm a sock dem, open to socialist ideas. I think I've kind of figured that out. I like the idea of workers owning the means of production. So there's that. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it happen. Fair enough, right? Medicare for all, Green New Deal, doing stuff about climate change, union jobs, worker co-ops, workers actually being able to own the means of production. That's kind of stuff that I believe in. So that's what I want. All right, moving on. Critical race theory. Do it. Alabama State Representative Chris Pringle doesn't seem to understand what critical race theory is, but he is sure that it's bad nonetheless, which is why, of course, he tried to ban it. Pringle had pre-filed a bill outlawing the teaching of critical race theory in Alabama schools. Here's what he said about said bill. It's pretty simple. All it says is you can't teach critical race theory in K through 12 or higher education in the state of Alabama. All right. So now he is pressed on, why would you do that? Why is it so important to block critical race theory? What makes it so bad that you can't teach people about it? What is both factually incorrect and wrong about it? Because look, I believe in facts, right? So if the facts are wrong, then of course you don't want to teach that in school. Well, now here's his answer. He says, quote, "It basically teaches that certain children are inherently bad people because of the color of their skin, period." I'm sorry, what? That's not what that is. That's not what critical race theory is. Okay? Critical race theory. So it basically examines social, cultural, and legal issues as they relate to race and racism. Critical race theorists actually focused on America's history of racism and discrimination continues to impact the country today. So when you look at, for example, policing in America, the justice system, how that relates to race, how black people are treated harsher, you can even tie this into like 1350, for example, how black people tend to be punished harsher, incarcerated for longer, even when doing crimes similar to white people. Or, for example, the response to black culture, popular black culture in media, and how public perceptions of black people are, stereotypes, maybe the idea that they're lazy or they're bums or they're thugs and things like that. All right. So now, what's interesting about critical race theory is that there's actually a pretty interesting critique of liberalism. Here's what they state: quote, "Critical race theorists believe that political liberalism was incapable of adequately addressing fundamental problems of injustice in American society, notwithstanding, of course, legislation and court rulings advancing civil rights in the 1950s and 60s, because of its emphasis on the equitable treatment under the law of all races," or basically what they consider to be color blindness, and saying that color blindness rendered it capable of recognizing only the most overt and obvious racist practices, for example, like Klan members doing lynchings, all that stuff, not those that were relatively indirect, subtle, or systemic. So, give me an example. Practices like redlining, like denying people jobs based on black-sounding names. Now, and again, they've done studies about this, where people with the exact same qualifications, job histories, everything, would submit applications to jobs, and people with the applications that had black-sounding names would immediately get rejected. With ethnic names, I should say. Not only that, but there's been situations where black people not allowed to wear their natural hair in public settings, or I should say school or professional settings. Not only that, but you have the school to prison pipeline. You have poor performing schools in areas because of the way that property taxes are set up. And of course, you have situations where the black community, black people in general in America, have not had that type of generational wealth in their communities, segregated communities, which of course lead to poor performing schools, lack of investment in those communities. And so you end up having less resources available for education than in traditional white neighborhoods. And so all of those things, that's critical race theory right there. And it's a real simple synopsis of it, but it just shows the interconnectedness of all these different issues. Now, Whitmire went on to ask Pringle to identify somebody who was teaching in Alabama. Again, his original definition is it teaches people that the color of their skin makes them wrong, right? Makes them racist or something like that. No, it basically teaches that certain children are inherently bad because of the color of their skin, period. So that's what, again, Pringle said. And so those of you who are asking, it's Pringle, not Kringle, as in Pringles can't, once you pop, can't stop. And so now Whitmire went on to ask him, hey, is there somebody who's teaching that in Alabama? And if so, I'd like some examples, please. Here's what Pringle said. These people, when they were doing the training programs and the government, if you didn't buy into what they taught you 100%, they send you away to a re-education camp. The what? Well, that escalated quickly. Wow. Okay. Now, that would be awful if it were true. Okay. So now Pringle went on to say, doesn't say who it was. This is at a government that held these training sessions. The white male executives are sent to a 3-day re-education camp where they were told that their white male culture wasn't there. I introduced a very brief version of the bill to start the conversation, but it's very difficult in this cancel society to have a frank discussion about racism in this country and this country's history. I mean, history is being rewritten, and I'm not exactly sure the accuracy of what's there now and what they're trying to change it into. It's still the greatest country that's ever been in the history of the world, and the radical left is trying to destroy that and tear us apart, and divide this country based on race and class, which is exactly what they do in communism. Wow. That escalated quickly, didn't it? Jesus. Notice how that in that rambling answer, there was nothing but buzzwords. He had everything too. Communism, radical left, tearing us apart, re-education camps. Really? He's got no idea. And maybe because he doesn't care, because it's pretty easy to look up what it actually is. But look, the reason that he's pushing this should be fairly obvious. Right now, critical race theory is something that conservatives are frothing at the mouth at. All right? Fox News, since March, mentioned it on their channel over 1,300 times. Jesus. Wow. They're obsessed. And by the way, they can't define it. All they know is critical race theory. Bad. Now, I happen to believe that learning our history is good. I think that if we learn from the past, then we can avoid the mistakes of the past and create a better future for all Americans, everybody. Now, unfortunately, that means confronting some really bad truths about what we have done, or I should say what our government has done as a country to people, not just black people, but also other minorities, Chinese people, other Asians, even going back to Irish people. And so, we haven't exactly treated people of different races and colors very well in this country. But black people tend to have gotten the worst of it as a result of chattel slavery. And the effects of that. Jim Crow, segregation, and what continues today. And it's still a part of that. So all of that, in order to fix those problems, the legacy of that, which does still affect people today, yes, Native Americans, Japanese Americans, absolutely. So many great examples of just the horribleness. And by the way, we're not the only country that's treated indigenous people terribly. Canada as well has had a huge, huge problem with erasing, ethnically cleansing indigenous people. So I don't think that it's just America that needs to have a real hard look at some of the stuff that they've done in the past, their government. So you really have to look at that stuff, warts and all. And there are some warts. But anybody who's interested in real social progress and correcting those wrongs so that we all move on as one people united under the flag, well, you would need to look at that stuff. But there would be one reason where somebody wouldn't want to look at that. Well, that reason, of course, would be pretty simple. Racism. I mean, look, a lot of people think that, no, race relations are fine. What are you talking about? No problem here. Working as intended. Well, if you think that way, and you know the actual history, and there's something, well, that says something about it, right? Now, if you don't know the history, and a lot of people don't, there is an ignorance about this, right? Now, ignorance can be fixed. Ignorance doesn't necessarily mean, like, you're a bad person, okay? If you don't know the history, if you were never exposed to the history, well, then that's exactly what critical race theory and education is there to try to fix. Once you learn the history and you're like, oh, crap, you're right, this is bad. We should do something about this. Wow, I didn't realize. That's great. That's what we want. But then there are people who learn the history and think, nope, totally justified, totally fine. 100%. Well, then that's the problem. And that problem isn't with education. That problem is with the person. Ignorance can be fixed. Racism actually can also be fixed. But it actually takes a lot longer, more time, more effort, and is never really ever guaranteed. But at least you should try. All right. That's all I got for y'all. Let's see. Ava Mira, thank you so much for the very kind donation. Hope summer's treating you in the community well. Thank you. I hope it's treating you as well, or well as well. So thank you very much. I do appreciate that. All right, everybody. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Very helpful if you do so. I do appreciate you spending the last hour with me today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, right here, live, YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitch. So thank you all. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you all later. Have a great day.
Sharp NATO except for
Mike Pence.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
There's insanity in the control room.
Who's got a hammer? I have not looked this conversation.
How you like that, boy? You idiot. You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.